Sunshine will be across Scotland. Temperatures struggling, though, for many staying in single figures, maybe just getting to 10 degrees in the far southwest. That's 50 Fahrenheit, but with a breeze, it will feel cooler. And then the fog becomes more widespread again on Saturday night. We could see some fog getting into parts of Wales, southwest England as well. So for some places, grey and gloomy remains the picture for the next couple of days. Some clearer skies again leads to a frost across parts of Scotland, maybe northern England, perhaps parts of Wales as well, although cloud amounts will come and go through the night. Then as we go into Sunday, that fog could again persist across some parts of the country, especially through the Midlands and northern England. That's where we could see it lasting all day. Where it does, temperatures will stay close to freezing, but away from that, it'll be just that little bit colder. As we go into next week, stays grey for many, a few sunny spells and cold. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Darren McCaffrey and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the news.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, happy Friday to you. It's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into everything that has got you talking today. You might have noticed that there was a by-election last night and apparently the party is over for Boris Johnson. That was a warning that came to him today after the shock by-election win by the Lib Dems, whose leader reckons that this is a real watershed moment in British politics. Johnson, on the other hand, says that the media keep basically focusing on the wrong things, such as parties. So what do you reckon? Is this a watershed for British politics, or is it just a standard by-election kick-in? And it's looking highly likely that yet another school term for kids might be impacted because of this whole COVID thing. Now, I'm saying enough now. We have to stop kids' lives being so deeply affected over a virus which, let's face it, barely even affects them. But do you agree with me? And when it comes to roads, let me ask you this. Who do you think should take priority? Cyclists or cars? We'll have that and more coming up, but first let's look at the headlines. Hello, I'm Karen Roberts. These are your latest headlines. The Prime Minister says he takes personal responsibility for the Conservatives' defeat in the North Shropshire by-election. Boris Johnson's comments come after the party lost a seat that it held for almost 200 years. The Lib Dems candidate, Helen Morgan, won by nearly 6,000 votes. The by-election was triggered by the resignation of Owen Paterson after he breached lobbying rules. He had a 2019 majority of almost 23,000.
Clearly, the vote in North Shropshire is a very disappointing result, and I totally understand people's frustrations. I hear what the voters are saying in North Shropshire, and in all humility, I've got to accept that verdict.
Police have confirmed the 4 young boys who died in a house fire in South London were home alone. The 2 sets of twins, aged 3 and 4, were treated at the scene before being taken to 2 hospitals where they were later pronounced dead. A 27-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of child neglect.
At 7 p.m. last night, we were called to reports of a fire in a residential property. Officers responded to the incident alongside colleagues from the London Fire Brigade and London Ambulance Service. As has been confirmed, 4 boys who were inside, 2 aged 3 and 2 aged 4, were brought out but sadly died. They were all related. There was nobody else inside the property at the time of the fire.
A man who killed his 2 young children and his girlfriend has been given 3 mandatory life sentences with a minimum of 40 years. Jordan Monaghan smothered his newborn daughter in January 2013. Later in August, he also smothered his toddler son. Then, while on police bail in 2019, he killed his new girlfriend with an overdose of prescription drugs. The father of murdered toddler Star Hobson says he's devastated by his daughter's death. Jordan Hobson says he'll never recover from the callous and cruel way in which she was taken from him. The toddler was physically and mentally abused for months before suffering fatal injuries in her home in West Yorkshire. Savannah Brockhill, who is the former partner of Star's mother, was jailed for life with a minimum term of 25 years for the murder. The Prime Minister will hold a COBRA meeting over the weekend with the devolved administrations to discuss the response to the Omicron variant. It comes as daily COVID cases in the UK hit a record high for the 3rd day in a row. More than 93,000 cases were reported in the past 24 hours, almost 5,000 more than yesterday. It's the highest daily total since the pandemic began. The First Minister of Wales is now urging everyone to meet outdoors and to take lateral flow tests before attending social gatherings. It follows the announcement that tougher measures will be introduced from December the 27th, following a surge in the Omicron variant. Nightclubs will close and there'll be a return to mandatory 2-metre social distancing in offices. Other measures include the reintroduction of one-way systems and barriers. Scotland is also introducing new COVID guidance to tackle increasing cases of the virus. Businesses are now legally required to take measures to minimise transmission of the new variant. The guidance also includes a return to one-way systems and the use of screens at service points.
Omicron has now replaced Delta as the dominant COVID strain circulating in Scotland. And that presents a challenge because we know Omicron is significantly more transmissible than Delta.
The Chancellor is holding crisis talks with businesses in the hospitality sector over COVID concerns. Rishi Sunak is under pressure to provide support to those hit by mass cancellations in the build-up to Christmas. The Chief Medical Officer has advised people to prioritise the events that matter to them. Industry experts estimate over £2 billion of trade have already been lost during the sector's busiest time of the year.
Rail passengers will be hit by the largest fare rise in nearly a decade. The Department of Transport has announced an increase of 3.8% from March the 1st. Rail Minister Chris Heaton-Harris says fees are being capped in line with inflation, and it will allow further investment in the railways. That's all your news for now. Let's now get back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Karen. Well, I have to say, what a depressing set of stories some of they were in those headlines. Goodness me. You know, I long for the day where we have positivity in the news. I'm going to make it my mission after Christmas. Come January and New Year, let's try and find some positive stories to focus on. That's what I'm going to do in Dewbs & Co. I'm going to try and get at least one thing that's happy. Because, you know, people's mental health at the moment, it's not great, is it? Anyway, keeping me company, trying to cheer us up tonight on a Friday. Tall order, I've got to say. We've got Polly Mackenzie, who's the Chief Exec of Demos Think Tank, and a former advisor to Nick Clegg. We've got Scarlett Maguire, who's a former Labour advisor, and James Woodenhausen, who's a visiting professor at London's South Bank University. Are you not a former advisor to anyone, James?
I'm not Woodenhausen either, but I'll accept
what
that.
are you?
It's Woodhausen. It's only the 19th time I've
How
been
have I got your name wrong after all this
People
time?
do, it's no problem.
James, James Woodhausen. There you go, former advisor to nobody. If anyone wants some advice from James, I'll connect you. Get in touch with me on this show. You know the drill by now anyway. It's not just about us and our feelings, it's about you. What is on your mind tonight and what are your thoughts on all the different stories we'll be covering? You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Of course, we're on all the social media platforms as well, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, we're everywhere. So get in touch and let me know what you're thinking today. But our first top story, of course, there was a result, some might say it was quite a shock result, in the North Shropshire by-election last night as the Tories lost a seat that they've held for nearly 200 years to the Liberal Democrats. What do you think to this? Was it a protest vote against Prime Minister Boris Johnson? He has taken full responsibility for the defeat.
Look, I'm responsible for everything that the government does, and of course I take a personal responsibility. I think that people are frustrated. Basically what's been going wrong, people have been hearing is just a constant litany of stuff about politics and politicians and stuff that isn't about them.
Well, the winner, Helen Morgan, overturned a Tory majority of almost 23,000 and declared that the party is over for the PM.
People of North Shropshire have spoken on behalf of the British people. They've said loudly and clearly, Boris Johnson, the party is over. Your government, run on lies and bluster, will be held accountable. It will be scrutinised, it will be challenged, and it can and will be defeated.
Well, there you go. The result follows a tough week for Johnson, who has faced criticism over Downing Street parties and a rebellion by his own MPs over COVID measures. What do you think to this? Is this North Shropshire by-election a watershed moment? That's according to Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems. That's what he called it. Or is it just your kind of standard by-election kick-in for the Tories? Polly?
Well, I think, you know, there's no question that this is a really significant loss for the Conservatives, just in terms of the raw numbers. Owen Paterson had held that seat with 62% of the vote. At the election, this by-election, they got 31% of the vote. Liberal Democrats went from 10 to 47, trouncing that huge majority. They've now a by-election majority of 6,000 that Helen Morgan now has is genuinely remarkable. Of course, that doesn't mean there's a change of government, doesn't mean anything changes in Parliament, doesn't mean that the Labour Party should pack up its boots and give up because they didn't do very well. It doesn't mean the Liberal Democrats are going to be the next government. There's a tendency with by-elections for people to get overexcited. But in a way, it's that tendency that gives by-elections their power. Conservative MPs, having seen this extraordinary loss, which comes completely from a set of unforced errors by Boris Johnson. We had this by-election because he tried to protect Owen Paterson from a punishment because of misdemeanours. They now kind of put Owen Paterson under the bus and saying, oh, it's all because of Owen Paterson's sleaze, forgetting that they tried to defend Owen Paterson. And then further unforced errors throughout the campaign, just giving gifts to Liberal Democrat leaflet printers of party photographs, party videos, all of that. And if you're a Conservative backbench MP, I think you've got to ask yourself the question, of course, this was a disastrous week, kind of ridiculous confluence of circumstances, but can you trust Boris Johnson not to give you a disastrous week like that again? And given his character, given his track record, I think the answer is no.
Scarlett, how much do you reckon this was a real kind of win for the Lib Dems, and how much do you reckon it was more tactical voting?
Oh, I think anybody would agree that there was a lot of tactical voting. I mean, Helen Morgan, in her acceptance speech, thanked Labour voters for voting for her. So what this was about was ousting a Conservative and sending a very serious message to Boris Johnson. And frankly, it looks as though he's in a death spiral. I know that he's supposed to recover and everything, but actually, if you look at what's happened, people are very angry because it's quite clear that Boris Johnson doesn't think the rules apply to him. He can make them for us, but meanwhile, and remember, some of the things that have been coming out today, I mean, about the Downing Street party with the man who's supposed to be investigating it, who ran it, Boris Johnson having a party, and we forget all the other things. I mean, it's only going to get worse. But there are two enormous problems. One is that Conservative MPs think, am I safe? And the answer is no. No. I mean, if North Shropshire isn't safe, nothing is safe. But the other is that the leaks are coming from Downing Street. And what it means is they're not frightened of what could happen. And that is really, really dangerous. And once those leaks start coming, as we see, there's even more. I mean, we have Sean Bailey, who tried to be the mayor of London, in charge of crime in London, at a party, being photographed at a party with masses of people. I mean, and he still hasn't resigned. And that's what people are angry about.
James?
Well, I
heard you tapping away there on some of that.
The striking thing for me is the weakness of the Labour Party, how badly they've done in all of this. And, I mean, I can't take seriously Ed Davies' remarks that this is, of course, a watershed for the Lib Dems. I mean, it's characteristically sort of flatulent exaggeration. I think what's interesting, though, is the enthusiasm with which the commentariat have embraced this sort of progressive alliance between Lib Dems and Labour people. You know, Labour doing so badly, Lib Dems have a flash in the pan. Everybody hopes that a coalition of those two parties would, you know, solve the Boris problem. But all I've got to ask is, what do any of them believe in? Lib Dems, I've no idea. Keir Starmer, no idea. Boris, principle-free zone, doesn't believe in anything. So I think we're largely left out on a limb, the population. And the result, you know, is an expression of, yes, a vote against everything that Boris stands for, but not necessarily one of enthusiasm for the Lib Dems, definitely not for the Labour Party.
Yeah, and I've got to say, Polly, I read an interview earlier on this morning, and somebody was quoting someone linked to the local paper who was saying that they had a suspicion that had Owen Paterson ran as an independent, he might have done quite a good job in this by-election, because they were saying that actually the sense of kind of feeling wasn't aimed at what Owen Paterson did, but it was more around kind of some of the things that happened afterwards about the rule change. And I found that quite interesting, because I think, and perhaps I'm wrong, that there is still this sense of support for the Tories. Of course, there's a lot of people angry, but I think that a lot of people don't care about these parties. A lot of people feel, to Boris Johnson's point that I played earlier, that the media are almost whipping up an orchestrated witch hunt against Boris Johnson. Do you think that's fair or not?
I think there's been quite substantial polling evidence asking people whether they've heard about these stories and whether they care about these stories. You're certainly right that there is a group of voters who don't care about them. And you're certainly right that what voters care about most is having a government that has their interests at heart, that is working to serve them. I think the problem is that this stuff suggests that there is one rule for the government and a different rule for the citizens. And that just convinces people, I think on a large scale, that the government doesn't have their best interests at heart, because the government isn't interested in the citizens' interests, if that makes sense. And I think, you've played a clip from Boris Johnson's interview earlier on. I think it's worth kind of viewers hunting it out and watching the whole thing. It is genuinely remarkable, because his story absolutely is this, that it's not the wrongdoing or the misbehaviour, it's the media talking about the misbehaviour. And there's a really good kind of hack for stopping the media talking about your bad behaviour is don't do the bad behaviour. It works like a treat, works every time. And that's the problem. Boris Johnson, in that interview, says that it's his job, it's the government's job, to persuade the media to be interested in vaccinations and skills policy. Do you know what? It's the communications department's job to persuade the journalists to be interested. It's the government's job to get on with actually doing things. But this government's not interested in that. They say we're having 40 hospitals, but they're not hospitals, they're not 40 of them, and they're not new. And they promise it all about the story that they're telling and never about the delivery and the consequences. And in this interview, Boris Johnson basically accepts. He thinks he's the PR guy for the government. He seems to have forgotten he's supposed to be the government.
And Scarlett, whenever we talk about parties, by the way, sorry to interrupt your point you were about to make, just hold your point for a second,
right.
I'm interested in it. But whenever we talk about parties, I get inundated saying, hang on a second, it wasn't just the Tories that were doing this. Lots of people feel very strongly that Labour were perhaps behaving in ways that they shouldn't have been at the same time that the Tories apparently were. What would you say to that?
Well, if they were, I'd like to see the evidence, because I don't know of any Labour parties. So I have no idea. But what I was going to say is that I mean, Boris Johnson was quoted as saying that he was complaining about the BBC, that they shouldn't have been talking about parties. They should have been talking about the vaccinations. And it's like he wants a state broadcaster like Russia Today or something like that, where they do what he wants. I mean, the thing about the parties is, you say, do people really mind? Well, actually, that's why they lost this by-election, was because people were really angry about what they had been doing, because we can see now what the public are very worried about the new virus, so they're cancelling parties, they're cancelling going out, they're cancelling all of this, even without being told. But when Boris Johnson said, this has all got to stop, and then it went on with him. Meanwhile, they were, not seeing their grannies, whatever. It just felt that there was one rule for us and another rule for the rulers. And that's why they lost the by-election.
Well, lots of you are getting in touch, of course, about this. Thomas has said people are angry with Boris, but lots of people want him to do well. But he keeps letting us down. Thomas says, we will come back to the Tories if Boris goes and Hancock stays away, he says. Sean says the by-election reflects 2 years of media attacks on Boris Johnson. The media went into overdrive against Boris as soon as he ran for leader, and they've been doing so ever since. They basically hate him for getting Brexit done. That's Andrew says that. And lots of kind of sentiment is coming in that basically feels that this is a very temporary situation, but it will correct itself when it goes to the next general elections. So keep your thoughts coming. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. Going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at the fact that retired teachers have been asked to return to schools to help keep them open. After the break, we'll be looking at that, and I want to know, do you think now enough? The children, they have been so badly impacted, disproportionately, I would say, with these COVID restrictions, especially when you consider that they are not overly en masse at risk of serious harm from COVID. Isn't it all just a bit unfair? I think so, but we'll be discussing that and more after the break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. This weekend we've got high pressure in charge of our weather, which brings dry and rather cloudy weather with the risk of some dense fog. And it will feel quite chilly as well. There's not much wind around over the weekend, and that means that fog will be persistent and temperatures will struggle to rise where we do see the persisting cloud and indeed fog. Now, as we take a look through the next few days, you can see certainly through tonight, we've got a lot of fog across some eastern areas of the UK. So fog warning is in force from the Met Office, and that remains in force until midday on Saturday. Elsewhere, lots of cloud overnight. Where we do see some clearer skies, though, for eastern Scotland and northeast England, we could see some frost as we start tomorrow morning. Quite windy, though, across the far southwest. And those winds will be quite gusty for a time across Cornwall. Elsewhere, though, with the light winds, it means that fog will be stubborn to clear. So for some places, it may not clear through the day on Saturday, staying gloomy and grey. To the west of the UK, some brighter spells are possible. I think the best of any sunshine will be across Scotland. Temperatures struggling, though, for many staying in single figures, maybe just getting to 10 degrees in the far southwest. That's 50 Fahrenheit, but with a breeze, it will feel cooler. And then the fog becomes more widespread again on Saturday night. We could see some fog getting into parts of Wales, southwest England as well. So for some places, grey and gloomy remains the picture for the next couple of days. Some clearer skies, again, leads to a frost across parts of Scotland, maybe northern England, perhaps parts of Wales as well, although cloud amounts will come and go through the night. Then as we go into Sunday, that fog could again persist across some parts of the country, especially through the Midlands and northern England. That's where we could see it lasting all day. Where it does, temperatures will stay close to freezing, but away from that, it'll be just that little bit colder. As we go into next week, stays grey for many, a few sunny spells and cold. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co. Your emails, your contacts have been flying in. I've got to say, Carol says, Michelle, I don't care about parties or wallpaper. The mainstream media won this election by constantly bashing Boris Johnson. Someone else, Paula, said Owen Paterson should have stood as an independent. He would have won. Someone else has said, many people partied last Christmas. It's time to end this. And by the way, why has it taken so long for these leaks to happen? I have to say, I've wondered that. If all these people were aware of all these parties last year, why wasn't they concerned then? Why has it taken a year to raise some concern? Steve says, I've been a lifelong Conservative voter for 72 years. I've never known so much sleaze, so many lies, so much hypocrisy and so much talk and promises with no action. They have definitely, but sadly, lost my vote. There you go, that's Steve. Anyway, let's get back to our next topic. Schools are being urged to ask ex-teachers to temporarily return to the classroom to help ease staffing shortages as the Omicron variant of COVID-19 spreads across the country. In an email to school and college leaders, Education Secretary Nadeem Sahawi told head teachers that they could support an effort to boost the number of supply staff by encouraging former employees to sign up. With record-breaking numbers of COVID cases in the UK, there are reports that some schools are experiencing very low attendances among staff members as they go off and self-isolate. Also, some have already taken the decision to close early ahead of the Christmas holidays. Got to be honest with you here, I think enough now. I think these kids, you know, we've all had disruptions to our lives, but these kids in these early formative years, you know, it's got to stop. It's got to stop. I find this disruption disproportionate, and I think it's time now. Scarlett, do you agree?
I completely agree. I think we should do everything possible to keep the schools open. I think it really, really matters.
What would you do?
Children. I think it's fine if they think they can get extra stuff. What they should have been doing is it's all about ventilation, right? That in May 2020, a report came out saying that to keep the schools open, they needed to seriously do ventilation. And what do we call ventilation at the moment? Opening windows in December and January. And actually, only now is the Department of Education looking at the schools and talking to people about how to do it. And it should have been done all the time. We all know that this disease goes through the air. And the way to keep people safe is to keep the rooms ventilated. And instead, you have children going off all the time. They go back. The parents are worried. I mean, what we need to do is we need to keep the schools open and have as few people as ill as possible. And that's what it is. I completely agree that the children desperately need school. I mean, it's not just about, you know, academic education. It's about their friends.
Indeed. Polly?
Yeah, I completely agree, but what we mustn't indulge in is kind of magical thinking that you can just pretend the disease away. If the teachers have it or the children have it, you do need to take action to manage those staff shortages. Absolutely agree with Scarlett that the best and most important thing to do is that ventilation. But, you know, kids who are coming into school, it ought to be vaccinated, in my view. We're actually an outlier among developed nations in not vaccinating kids under 12. And, you know, I think kids from 5 upwards, parents should be given the option to get a vaccination for those kids, because that would reduce the transmission in schools and help to keep the schools open, which is the most important thing, help to reduce the number of cases among the teachers, so you've got enough teachers for the kids. Stuff like this to kind of leverage civil society, retired teachers, to keep those schools functioning for the kids. Brilliant idea, really important. But fundamentally, you've got to try and keep the infection rates down. And that's got to be through ventilation and vaccination.
So you want vaccination of kids down to 5?
I mean, not mandatory, obviously, but I think parents should absolutely be offered that choice.
James?
Well, I've yet to see the evidence that vaccination of children down to 5 or even higher ages really is effective, given the incidence of the virus among children. And I think what strikes me is the insouciance with which schools say, oh, well, we're ready for staggered learning, hybrid learning, remote learning, and so on. Haven't children suffered enough? I'm completely with you on this, Michelle, over the past year, for schools, if they are forced to such measures, to represent them as the setbacks that they really are for real learning, for kids in classrooms actually interacting with teachers. And I'm afraid the dad's army factor that's been adduced, doesn't really inspire any more confidence in the treatment that children will get than I get from the unions in the schools as well. It really is time to stop the panic there and to start putting the priority on children's education and not to dissemble and represent a necessity occasionally as a virtue. There's nothing virtuous about remote learning for kids.
Yeah, see, I've been thinking about this because I'm very against the disruption of this schoolings. And what I would do, my solution would be, I would stop asymptomatic testing. So I wouldn't desperately seek all of these cases all of the time. And I would identify some key professions that I wouldn't apply the self-isolation rules to. And I would put teachers in that group. I wouldn't be forcing teachers off to self-isolate just because they've tested positive for something that they don't have any symptoms of. I wouldn't do that. I would have a bank of teachers, supply teachers, etc., ready and waiting in the wings to step up if there was someone that was ill and they had to go off. And I am pro-choice. I'm pro-choice when it comes to, you mentioned vaccination of children. If as a parent, that's what you really want to do, you want to give your child this vaccine. But for the life of me, I cannot comprehend why any parent would want to give their healthy child this vaccine. I wouldn't.
But lots of parents want to give their healthy children the MMR vaccine. They want to give their children the diphtheria vaccine and the tetanus vaccine, because the point is that it prevents disease, that it reduces the chance of serious illness. So you don't give vaccines to children. You don't give vaccines to anyone because they're ill. You give the vaccines to stop them from getting ill.
But it's absolutely statistically proven that children are it's almost negligible, the risk of serious harm to the child because of COVID.
But it's also negligible, the risk of the vaccine. And what's clear is that the children, because of the way children interact, are absolutely essential to the transmission of this disease. They are enabling the virus to thrive, because kids, as everyone knows, that from the first time you put your kid into a nursery, you instantly get ill because they bring new novel diseases home. Children 5 to 9 are the largest percentage of infections, the highest age range of infections at the moment.
But do you concede they're not getting ill themselves?
Substantially.
Some of them are.
Some of them are getting...
And they bring it home to the parents.
They bring it home, they give it to the teachers. They absolutely become... They can turn the schools
into... If what you're saying is true, then what barrier would there be to further actions like this? Close the schools indefinitely, given that children are always going to be...
We've suggested vaccination and ventilators.
I can't make it out.
Forgive me. Vaccination to reduce the contagiousness of children, and ventilation so that potentially you can reduce the self-isolation rules, so that a teacher can safely be in the classroom, for example, with a mask without worrying that they are going to suddenly infect 20 children in the classroom around them, which they may do in a really poorly ventilated space.
Yeah, this whole kind of conversation about vaccinating children, and again, I have to stress, if you want to vaccinate your child...
Well, the point is I'm not allowed to vaccinate my children at the moment. It's not part of the public health measures.
You will be able to, because it was leaked at the weekend that actually now there's considerations for 5 to 11-year-olds to get this vaccine. So imminently, if that's your desire to vaccinate your child, then you can. I guess the point I'm trying to make is I cannot comprehend why anybody would want to do that, because I've got the JCVI, and everyone by now is familiar with it. The JCVI themselves, just in September, they said, and I quote, there is substantial uncertainty regarding the health risks associated with the side effects of these vaccines.
But there is substantial uncertainty about the side effects associated with getting COVID.
Not for children.
And with long COVID in children. Of course, the risks are relatively low, but the risks that they talk about and worry about with vaccines tend to be the kind of 1 in a million kind. So the crucial thing is, I am against lockdowns. I think lockdowns, especially of our schools, of our essential public services, are awful, right? But if you're against lockdowns, in my view, you need to be in favour of masks, you need to be in favour of ventilation, and you need to be in favour of vaccination, because that is how you reduce the impact of the disease in order to reduce any need for what they call non-pharmaceutical interventions, like lockdowns. And actually, if the schools are absolute vectors of disease transmission are the places that you get the super spreader event, that you go from 1 case to 100 cases over the course of a week, that then spreads to 10,000 cases in the community, then it's absolute madness not to try and do everything you can to prevent that transmission in those schools.
Well, your whole focus is on the risks of transmission and so on. And
Yes, because I've met children.
Your whole focus is on the risk of transmission, and what you're not considering for both the adult or the child population is the advanced treatments that are now developed for COVID, and which have been in shockingly short supply. It's one of the big scandals of the last weeks, generally underrated, the fact that we are not getting the drugs to people to make sure that any stay that they have in hospital is minimised and the discomfort minimised, and obviously the deaths minimised. Until we get out of this panic mode, which I think you're encouraging, about everything being subordinate to the new Omicron virus, that transmissibility in that virus is the only thing that we have to focus on. We needn't think about treatments. We needn't really worry much about hospitalizations. It's just the high transmissibility numbers that you want to focus on.
Of course.
And, you know, that just isn't justified in terms of science, in terms of the real damage that will be achieved by closing schools, which is what the government is bent on doing.
I think nobody in this panel wants to close schools. I think we're absolutely. So there's no point, James, in keeping on trying to pretend that we do want to close schools. But I think that yet possibly, you know, the right drugs haven't been found and they're not being used. But at the moment, there is no question that in intensive care units there are more and more people with COVID, and what they're doing is they're taking out all the space in the intensive care units.
48% of people in intensive care units are unvaccinated.
Right. Well,
but we know that that's very substantially because the unvaccinated population skews young. The younger you are, the less likely you are to have taken up the vaccine. And that means that you get a distorted effect in the caseloads, because we know that young people are less likely to need intensive care support. Brilliantly. So that means that because older people are much more likely to need intensive care and older people are much more likely to have been vaccinated, that's how you get that data effect of absolutely plenty of vaccinated people being in intensive care.
Let me just float a theory, if I may. Do you not worry that we've slightly lost our minds when it comes to this whole COVID scenario? Because this is a disease, when you look at the mortality rate, and how many people will actually die from this disease, it is really quite small. Of course, very sad for anyone that loses anybody, but it's very, very small percentage of people that will become, you know, die from this. Of those that die, a significant number have comorbidities. That's never really talked about, but it is a fact that the people that tend to die from this, not always, but the people that often die from this have comorbidities. We seem to have entered into a territory that it would have been unthinkable of 2 years ago. And it's kind of like this whole, you know, shutting down the schools, this whole conversation about vaccinating children, the whole point of this vaccination of children, which I am personally against. I would never, nobody will ever convince me to give my child this vaccine. However, I respect individual choice. If that's what you want to do, go do it. But the only reason that got approved in the first place was it was not recommended by JCVI for 12 to 15-year-olds on health grounds alone. That was how we always used to authorise vaccines in this country for children. It was on the benefit to the child, the person receiving the vaccine, full stop. That then extrapolated out because the CMO's chief medical officer said, well, actually, in order to stop closing schools, yes, give them the vaccination. But it didn't stop them closing schools. No. They've continued to close the schools. So that argument for me is null and void.
But actually, there are very few. I mean, there might be some schools closed next week because if they're full of COVID, they're going to say, well, let's not open for the last week. Very few schools.
They're not full of COVID, by the way. It's the number of people that are in hospital with COVID, not in intensive care, but generally.
I'm talking about schools full of people with COVID. I mean, I'm not actually talking about intensive care at the moment. But actually, the schools are being kept open. They are desperate to try and keep the schools open to try and keep the children going. I mean, this whole thing about everybody wanting the schools to close is absolutely wrong.
Well, we'll see in the new year whether you're right, Scarlett. We'll see whether you're right. Generally, the feeling in society at the moment is captured by the phrase that I've mentioned a number of times on this show, which I very much like you to come back on, which is the Great Resignation. Teachers are resigning from their jobs. Children are being told that it's okay not to go to school. The general feeling is one of lethargy and of disenchantment with action and with disenchantment
I don't know
with the future.
who you're talking to.
Well,
children
because
are
you can
desperate.
see,
Children
are desperate. That's for sure. But are the authorities desperate to get them back?
Yes, teachers. I mean, I know teachers. My niece is a teacher. Teachers are desperate to keep the children at school. They know that actually that's
It's not what I'm hearing from the teachers' unions.
Well,
it's not what I'm hearing from Zazawi.
Well, I don't care. The reason the schools are open is because they are desperately trying to keep open. I mean, if you listen to head teachers who are interviewed time after time, they say how much effort they're making to keep the schools open and how much the children want to go on going to school. They know that's their social life for most children. For many of them, that's the best place to be.
Well, there you go. And I have to say, lots of you are emailing in, and I'll hopefully be reading some of those out in a second when we get back from the break. Just to be clear, by the way, there was a report, a study out in the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, which was really interesting to me, outlining that teachers are not at increased risk of hospital admission or severe COVID-19 during the 20 to 21 academic year. So there's lots of interesting information about this, and I would love, whoever's making these decisions about closing schools to read some of this stuff and think on and start prioritising the children would be my advice. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be looking at whether or not cyclists should be given priorities over drivers on the road.
On Mark Dolan tonight, I'll be meeting one of the victims of the post office postmaster scandal, Seema Misra, who was wrongly jailed for stealing and whose life was destroyed. She joins me in the studio at 10. Tonight's big question is who replaces Boris if he goes. We'll look at the runners and the riders with the Sun's Trevor Kavanagh and former Tory MP Jerry Hayes. Reacting to the big stories of the day is my panel, and in my big opinion, Boris Johnson's running out of time and friends. See you at 9.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
can tell you, we're still having the conversation about whether or not children should be vaccinated. That is the conversation that just dominated our break. Anyway, you guys have been in touch. Susan says, it's the teaching unions that keep advising their members to close schools. Susan says there's no need. Jabs are being done and lateral flow tests, etc. You should keep the kids in school. They have missed enough education. Sue says, do not vaccinate children because she feels they will survive COVID. Michael is talking about the costs of tests. If COVID tests cost £25, oh, I get where you're going with this, Michael. If COVID tests cost £25, then cases would plummet. And there you go. That's what he's suggesting in terms of why don't you outprice people from testing? What I've got to say is, Chloe says, how do you keep your schools open? Stop testing. I have to say, I completely agree. Why have we got this desperate desire to find these cases wherever they will be? Like, why? What do you think is driving that? I've always found that quite fascinating.
I've got an idea.
Hold on, we were tested to come in here.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying.
You know,
people
so
are
GBNews believes in testing.
No, but what I'm saying is I think all of this asymptomatic testing everywhere should stop.
They
it's
want you to
unnecessary.
go. They want you to go
think.
through the motions. If you go back to the Labour Party,
I think they
years
want to
find
the people who have the disease.
You will
Don't
find
go back to the Labour Party.
Well, I'd rather not.
We've got to start talking. We've got to move on.
We're going to talk about cyclists.
Yeah,
it's going to be great fun.
When they were in government, they wanted as many points of contact between the medical profession and patients.
Right,
and
well,
they said
there
it
you
again
go.
and again.
Let's
and that's
talk
what
about
they want
cyclists.
now.
Let's talk about cyclists. Honestly, we could fill 10 shows, I think, with this COVID topic, but we won't move on. Did you know that the Highway Code has changed a rule giving cyclists and pedestrians priority over drivers at junctions? Did you know that? Well, that change will come into force on January the 29th and will create a new hierarchy of responsibility based on the vulnerability of road users. Cyclists will also give priority to pedestrians. The AA has warned that the change could create confusion and dangerous situations because only a third of motorists know about it. I've got to say, I'm a motorist. I didn't know about it. Did you?
Well, I'm a lapsed motorist and now a cyclist, but I'm very hostile to the war on the car. Having said that, I looked at the proposals and I think, you know, it is fair enough to say if I charge at you, Michelle, I'm not going to do as much damage as if I drove a car at you. So I think it's fair. I'd rather not talk about it as a hierarchy of vulnerabilities, which is roughly what they say. But the most striking things about the proposals, apart from the fact that people aren't catching up with them, and I think the AA is right about that, the most striking thing about the proposals is that they are grounded in the doctrine that cycling should be seen as a form of mass transit. And secondly, even more interestingly, all road users, including pedestrians, must effectively know the highway code. Now, that's what they're hinting at in what I've read. So I can't see cycling being a form of mass transit in this country for many years to come, and I say that as an enthusiastic cyclist. And second of all, I certainly can't see pedestrians knowing the intricacies of the highway code every time they stop at a junction in the future.
But actually, I don't know my highway code, obviously, because I always thought pedestrians did have priority, and that if I was walking across a small road and a car wanted to turn left into it, that I had priority over it, and I have stopped cars from doing it. Really not pleasing them at all.
What do you mean? What have you done?
Because she's formidable, that car.
He stops them and says, "Excuse me, I'm trying to walk here."
I'm walking here.
And you? And people, do they?
But Scarlett, you're right. I have a memory of the highway code. I'll have to check it afterwards. But where specifically, maybe my driving test was just a bit more recently, you absolutely are advised that if somebody's already walking in the road, you should not. You should wait and give priority to the pedestrian, which makes sense, right? Like, because it's exactly that point. If a car hits a pedestrian, it has much more of an impact than if a pedestrian hits a car. And so you shouldn't just think about, oh, well, it's equal, everyone's to blame. The fact is, if you are driving around several tons of metal, you have to take responsibility for the impact that metal may have on other people. And it's also the case for if you've got a bike and you are, mowing down a kid, then absolutely you must take responsibility for that as the larger road user.
And I have to say that as a pedestrian, cyclist and driver, I find most cars are really nice. I often come out of my little road to cross the big Holloway Road, and drivers let me do it. I mean, so actually, I'm not having a war on the car, and I think that most drivers actually they think about it. I mean, particularly, you know, if you're in a traffic jam, you just let people through.
Don't you think cyclists should have some form of insurance?
Why?
Well, if you've ever driven a car that's been damaged, and I have, by the way, by a cyclist that comes up on the side, scratches your car, and then cycles off, there's no recourse. If I hit something in my car, if I hit another car, for example, that car will be pulling over straight away, taking my details and wanting some cash off me to repair that car.
Well, but I mean, I could be a pedestrian and hurting a car. I think no.
Well,
I think it happens very,
There's
very
one difference,
rarely.
Scarlett, if I may, which is I detect among my fellow cyclists, which is among some of them, well, I must avoid the sweeping generalisation, that they are basically self-righteous, saving the planet, and can do anything that they like at traffic lights.
I know, they are the most dangerous.
No, I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying that some of them feel privileged in this way. Now, we could get on to electric scooters and the menace they represent.
I've only got about 3 minutes left on programme.
Well, that's all right.
Scooters.
Scoot away.
That is
Michelle.
a good topic. I shall take that. I will
Please.
register that in my head, and we'll do that another day.
I'm amazed more people aren't killed on them, actually.
No, well,
genuinely.
they are something. There's no doubt
I've got
about
one
it.
and I love mine. Anyway, let's talk about Christmas. And nearly Christmas, isn't it? Britain may experience its first widespread white Christmas for over a decade, with a prediction of possible snow late next week. There was this time, I'm trying to think. I'll say I'm trying to think. That's not true at all, because I don't need to think, because someone's written it here for me, because the last time there was that much snow across this much of the country on December the 25th was back in 2010, when 83% of weather stations reported snow, and others have experienced snow falling. Anyway, what do you think? Did you get excited, Polly, when you see... Well, you've got kids. They would love a white Christmas.
I mean, it doesn't need to be Christmas. Frankly, just the opportunity at some point to get out in the garden, scrape a micro sort of amount of snow off the patio furniture. That's what we do, and build a little snowman. And the bigger the snowman, the better. So that's my hope, is just a little bit of snow, enough to make basically a popsicle.
I mean, I hate to say that, but I think bringing out one's inner snowman is very, very important, you know, complete with the carrot and all the rest of it. Must we decorate it like Boris's unkempt hair? No. But the temptation is there all the same.
Do you like snow, Scarlett?
Yeah, I don't like the after effects of snow. I think being snow, but I'm slightly worried about it snowing over Christmas, because I have to drive back from Dorset on the 27th, because I'm supposed to be here at 6 a.m. on the 28th. 6 a.m? I know, I didn't read the email properly when I said yes. So actually, it can snow on Christmas Day, but please, can it be OK by the 27th so I can actually get here?
Get you some snow tyres.
Yeah, well, there you go. If anyone is listening that can control whether or not it snows, let Scarlett get in. That is very good. That is very dedicated. 6 a.m, I like that. And by the way, if you are going out, if it is going to snow and you are going to make a snowman, do me a favour. Don't rush out to put a mask on your snowman and then take a picture and put it on Twitter and think that it's hilarious, because I remember all those from last year, don't you? All those snowmen that had the masks on. I thought, oh, God, I can't believe that we are back in that exact same position, potentially, a year on. Anyway, Nikki, has been in touch saying at the start of the programme, we're talking about good news, and we was talking about some good news, and she says, here's some for you. My son-in-law, James, got promoted at work. There you go. That's very good. Congratulations, James, on your promotion. Lots of you getting in contact as well, I have to say, about pedestrians and cyclists. Some of them, got to be honest, can't read out, but I am reading them. I'm hearing.
You've got road rage on your laptop there.
Yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying, but you know, I won't read them out, but they've registered. Anyway, that is pretty much all we've got time for. It's the weekend, which I'm always happy about, because I'm only on here Monday to Friday, so I'm looking forward to my weekend. Has anyone got anything interesting planned very quickly, yes or no? Christmas plans?
No, half of my family is still in COVID isolation. This is my first day of freedom.
Is it?
But a couple of family members, so we're still have to be at home, so we'll just stay at home.
Staying at home. And you're partying? You've got your party outfit on?
I'm going to a party tonight, but the dinner party tomorrow was cancelled.
And James, I've run out of time, so anything exciting you're doing this weekend, you'll have to tell me after the show. That is all we've got time for. Thank you very much for your company. Thank you to my wonderful panel. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. This weekend we've got high pressure in charge of our weather, which brings dry and rather cloudy weather with the risk of some dense fog. And it will feel quite chilly as well. There's not much wind around over the weekend, and that means that fog will be persistent and temperatures will struggle to rise where we do see the persisting cloud and indeed fog. Now, as we take a look through the next few days, you can see certainly through tonight, we've got a lot of fog across some eastern areas of the UK. So fog warning is in force from the Met Office, and that remains in force until midday on Saturday. Elsewhere, lots of cloud overnight. Where we do see some clearer skies, though, for eastern Scotland and northeast England, we could see some frost as we start tomorrow morning. Quite windy, though, across the far southwest. And those winds will be quite gusty for a time across Cornwall. Elsewhere, though, with the light winds, it means that fog will be stubborn to clear. So for some places, it may not clear through the day on Saturday, staying gloomy and grey. To the west of the UK, some brighter spells are possible. I think the best of any sunshine will be across Scotland. Temperatures struggling, though, for many staying in single figures, maybe just getting to 10 degrees in the far southwest. That's 50 Fahrenheit, but with a breeze, it will feel cooler. And then the fog becomes more widespread again on Saturday night. We could see some fog getting into parts of Wales, southwest England as well. So for some places, grey and gloomy remains the picture for the next couple of days.